C'est bon, on commence? C'est bon. Alors, déjà bonsoir à tous. Euh, je crois qu'on m'a demandé de parler en anglais, n'est-ce pas? D'accord, entièrement. Donc, je crois que vous êtes quasiment tous francophones, n'est-ce pas? J'aurai l'honneur ce soir de m'adresser à vous en anglais. Donc tout d'abord, je pense on peut commencer avec un enseignement traditionnel. Donc tout d'abord avec la génération de la bodhicitta suivie de la prise de refuge. So, comme je m'adresse là d'abord aux personnes qui sont ici, so first of all, I'd like to ask you to join me in the taking of refuge and the cultivation of bodhicitta. Sanji chudan tsuji chunam la chanchu pardo dane chabsuch dage jinsu jibe sunam che rola penjira sanji robar shu sanji chudan tsuji chunam la chanchu pardo dane chabsuch dage jinsu jibe sunam chi rola benjira sanje ro par shu sanje chodan soje chonam la chanchu pardo dane jamsu che da ge jinso jibe sunam chi rola benjira sanje ro par shu. Good evening and welcome. So today our topic is recalling the late Künzig Shamar Rinpoché, the 14th Shamarpa. And today is also in the Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist calendar, a very auspicious day, for it is the full moon day, and not of any month, of the fourth Tibetan month, which is the month that commemorates the birth of the Buddha. And on the 15th today is the commemoration of the Buddha's awakening as well as his Parinirvana. So today probably is the most sacred, holy day in the Buddhist calendar, and it happens to correspond to the anniversary as well of the passing of the late 14th Shamarpa, who passed away on the 11th of June. So anniversary on the Western calendar, and also close to the anniversary according to the Tibetan calendar, where actually 2 days prior, according to the Tibetan calendar, Rinpoche passed away, and his meditation at the moment of his passing ended on this very day of the full moon. So this is a very auspicious day, and we would like today to recall the memory of the late Shamar Rinpoché, and maybe go over his life. And so back in 2014, just after Rinpoche's passing, I had the honor and privilege to write a short um, summary of Rinpoche's life to honor his memory. So I thought the easiest thing would be for us to sort of go through what I had wrote back then, and then maybe I can sort of comment on it and maybe deepen some of the points that was already expressed in the text. And this text, of course, is has been published in English and also translated into French, and so you may have access to it, and if not now, you can also have access to it in the future. So the first point is of course to sort of situate the 14th Shamarpa, to understand who he is. It's important for us to understand many different things. First of all, what is the Shamarpa? What does that title actually mean? Who are the Shamarpas? And then this also leads us to having to look at the story or history of the Shamarpas briefly, and as well also discuss the what we call the activity of a Buddha, and particularly the activities of the bodhisattva. How are those understood in Buddhism? And this, of course, also is in relation to the history of Buddhism in general, and more particularly to the history of the Karmakaju lineage. So we have to sort of answer a few points or clarify some of these points for us to understand who the 14th Shamarpa was. So I had written the origin and history of the Shamarpa's incarnation line. So according to Mahayana teachings, an awakened being is considered through his realization to have the ability to manifest simultaneously an infinite number of his manifestations in various places to help other beings. The Shamarpas are believed to be a series or line of such emanations who manifest to serve the historical Buddha's activity and to benefit the world. The Shamarpa's coming or manifestation is considered to have been foretold by the historical Buddha Shakyamuni himself, as recorded in a prophecy within the Bhadra Kalpita Sutra, the Bhadra Kalpita Sutra. The Karmapa, so just to the a parenthesis regarding this is that, if I may comment just briefly here, is we have, of course, you're all aware, I'm sure, of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of reincarnated teachers called Tulkus, and we have many of them. Many such lines of Tulkus. Most famous of them, of course, in the modern world is the Dalai Lama, for example, but also within other lineages, also not just the Kagyu lineage, such as in other lineages, the Gelugpa lineage, you have the Dalai Lama, the Panchen Lama, and so forth, many high-ranking in the Tibetan society lamas or Tulkus, and then many others, and also within other lineages also. So it's a well-established sort of custom of today in the Tibetan Buddhist world of masters having their successor as rebirth or reincarnation. So this form of transmission from one life to another life of continuous manifestation exists. And however, what I would like to sort of underline here is probably the first one point, the precedence, or why is it that this tradition exists in Buddhism. For example, you may find that in other Buddhist cultures or traditions in the world, this tradition is not formalized, where there is officially an individual being recognized. But anyway, it is well accepted. That is, in Buddhist scriptures, and particularly in the Mahayana scriptures, it is mentioned, there's many mentions of the Buddha, but particularly also of bodhisattvas who have made the commitment to take a rebirth again and again to benefit sentient beings. And so this is sort of the foundation or the idea behind this institutionalization of rebirths of important Buddhist teachers. Now, the important point also to point out here is that within the Karmakaju lineage, so this Karmakaju lineage is one of the main branches that stems from the great master Gampopa himself. He was a disciple of both the Kadamba lineage, coming from the master Atisha, as well as the main disciple of Milarepa, who held the lineage of transmission from Marpa, of the esoteric teachings that came from India through Naropa, and himself having received them through Tilopa. Tilopa received the instructions directly from the Buddha Vajradhara, but also held the transmissions of four great lineages of transmission. So the term Kaju means the just the lineage of the transmission of teachings. So it's a general term, but here often used more specifically to designate one specific lineage. There's a mention of the Kabapshi, the four great lineages of India that Tilopa had received, as well as the direct transmission from the Buddha Vajradhara himself. So here it is the lineage that preserves the highest teachings, the most profound teachings of the Buddha, the ultimate teachings, pointing out to the ultimate nature of mind, and the teachings of the Vajrayana, as well as the teachings of the Mahayana, and also the teachings of the Shravakayana path. So all these teachings are preserved within the Kaju lineage. However, the aspect of the esoteric teachings is mainly what has been passed through the lineage from Marpa and Milarepa to Gampopa, and the transmission of focusing mainly on the Kadamba instructions, on the Mahayana instructions, as well as also esoteric teachings. Gampopa had received them through the Kadamba lineage, and these two lineages were combined. And among Gampopa's many disciples, one of his foremost disciples was the first Karmapa, Tusum Chempa. Tusum Chempa is actually how to say, a term of deference, meaning he is the knower of the three times, due to the Karmapa's omniscient. And the first Karmapa, Tusum Chempa, had mentioned that he would have numerous manifestations to benefit sentient beings. Just as reminded on this very special day to us by the the present 17th Karmapa, Taye Dorje, when mentioning the late Shamarpa, that these great bodhisattvas, and this is what the first Karmapa also wrote, that although there is ultimately no such thing as birth and death, that they will continuously manifest birth and death to benefit sentient beings, that they would have numerous manifestations. And so these esoteric teachings and the Mahayana teachings and so forth were transmitted through lines of master and disciple. So we have, it's important to understand on one hand the sort of lineage of transmission which all of us can receive, have the privilege to receive and put into practice. And among those who receive them, there are of course individuals who will excel in these practices and achieve the highest degree of realization, and who becomes in that sense the main lineage holder of these teachings. And so one has in this sense the example of the masters such as Tilopa, Naropa, Marba, Milarepa, who were all individuals who had completely dedicated themselves to the practice of the Dharma and achieved within their lifetime the realization of Buddhahood. And we have had since then till now also continuous lineage holders, all accomplished and realized. And the Karmapas and Shamarpas are also an incarnation lineage who have also played the role. As for the Karmapas, each and every Karmapa has been the main lineage holder of the Karmakaju lineage, and most of the Shamarpas as well have been the lineage holders, as well as there being other figures in the history of the Karmakaju lineage. So when we speak of the Shamarpa, it's important to understand that. And another point I wanted to underline or highlight here is the fact that the Karmapa and Shamarpa are regarded as actually the effective manifestations of Buddhas. For example, it is believed that before manifesting actually as the Karmapa, the Karmapas in the past have already been taking rebirth and manifesting as the disciples of the Buddha and so forth. That they had actually in many aeons ago, in front of first generated. So I'm mentioning here also another point that's important, because the Karmapas and Shamarpas are also undiscernible, and so to speak, they are often considered also two emanations of the same enlightened being. So this is following, for example, the prophecy of the second Karmapa, Karmapakshi, who had foretold that in the future he would manifest as two benefit sentient beings. Although we must also not limit our understanding to just these manifestations that uphold this title and uphold this role, because as the first Karmapa had told, in many different worlds, in many different places, Karmapas can have manifestations, but the Bodhisattvas may have manifestations to benefit sentient beings. And so this is somehow beyond the scope of just simply a certain role. They can have a multitude of manifestations. And so the point I wanted to highlight is the fact that the Karmapa and the Shamarpa, they are not just, we may talk of there being many reincarnations or masters being rebirth of something somewhat common. They are really very unique and not to be confused with any reincarnation or rebirth. They are truly the living presence of enlightened beings. Karmapa and Shamarpas in this sense are considered to be the living presence of the great Mahasiddha, for example, Saraha. Also, sometimes they are considered to be inseparable with the great Padmasambhava. So they are really for the Karmapa, he is considered to actually be Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of great compassion in person. And as for the Shamarpa, often associated with the Buddha Amitabha as the living presence of the Buddha Amitabha in this world. And sort of when we go back into the history based on the Buddhist scriptures and visions of previous teachers, is mentioned that the very first time he who later will become the Karmapa or manifest as the Karmapa was a bodhisattva who took the bodhisattva vows in front of a Buddha named Simhasvara, or his name means basically lion roar, the Buddha lion roar. And that and then later this bodhisattva, in a single samadhi, in a single state of absence of all distraction, remained in samadhi and achieved all the stages of bodhisattva and achieved enlightenment. Following this, then he was presented with a crown symbolizing his realization, made out of the hairs of 32 million dakinis, according to the story. So the dakinis are wisdom beings. So this is all symbolizing the Karmapa's immense wisdom and immense commitment to benefit other sentient beings. It is also mentioned that, according to the Mahayana scriptures, there has been in the past, in this planet and at our time, several Buddhas already, and it's foretold that in this planet 1,000 Buddhas will appear. And the historical Buddha Shakyamuni is considered to be the fourth in those 1,000 Buddhas. And the next Buddha to manifest is believed to be the Buddha Maitreya. And the Buddha following that, the sixth Buddha, he is foretold to be the Buddha Simhananda, or the voice of the lion, is the sort of meaning of the name of that Buddha. And he, Sangye Singita is the Tibetan name. And that would be the sixth Buddha. And all individuals who come to meet with the Karmapas and the Shamarpas, if they are not able to achieve enlightenment prior to that, by the commitment of these great bodhisattvas of the Karmapa and the Shamarpa, that when they appear as the Buddha, all the individuals they have come into contact with, who have not yet become realized, will then, in the presence of this sixth Buddha, achieve enlightenment and freedom from conditioned existence. So it is a very great privilege, if we think about this, for us all to have met with such teachers, because from the Buddhist perspective, if we really look at our conditioned state, it's our confusion doesn't end on its own accord. We need wisdom to clear away our confusion. Confusion, building more confusion, just perpetuates confusion. It doesn't end on its own. And so samsara in this sense really has no end for us. Although ultimately it's just maybe untrue, it's like an illusion, yet for those who are confused, it will appear as real and they suffer greatly from it. And this perpetuates itself. It doesn't come to an end all on its own. So it is very important for us to gain realization, understand the true nature of mind, understand the nature of phenomena, so to be able to clear away all confusion. And so the role of the teachings of the Buddha Dharma is simply, if I were to put it in a nutshell, it would be simply the transmission of this wisdom. As long as this wisdom is present, we may say that the Buddha's teachings are present. If there are, for example, institutions, people who call themselves Buddhist, that alone doesn't, guarantee the presence of the Buddhist teachings. If the wisdom is there, that means if there are individuals who have that wisdom and who are able to transmit that wisdom, then the Buddha's true teachings are truly fully present in this world. Once that has disappeared, then although there may be people who call themselves Buddhist, and the true message or the true teaching, the essential part of the Dharma is no longer present. And so I believe this is somehow the main function and role of these great masters known as the Karmapa, the Shamarpa, and also as well as other great teachers who take rebirth. They all aim at preserving this wisdom of and themselves embodying it and giving access to it to individuals. So to enable individuals to gain wisdom and therefore through that overcome conditioned existence and dukkha, or the dissatisfied nature and suffering of conditioned existence. And so this is the purpose of the presence of the Dharma, why the Buddha taught in the first place, the purpose of the lineage of transmission. The lineage of transmission is mainly this transmission of wisdom, and great masters who are fully enlightened may yet still to ensure that this wisdom never dies away, that is always perpetuated, take rebirth again and again. And so it's in this context that we must understand the presence of the Karmapas and the Shamarpas. So I'll come back here to my text. So the Karmapa, founder of the Karmakaju order, and the Shamarpa are actually considered to be two different manifestations of the one and same awakened being. The second Karmapa, Karmapakshi, was what I mentioned earlier, foretold that he would take rebirth in the future as two different emanations. The third Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje, so this is in the late 13th century or early 14th century, declared his principal disciple, Trapasingye, to be his equal in realization. And as a sign of this, he offered him a replica copy of his own black crown, but in red color. And then the fourth Karmapa, Rolpe Dorje, reaffirmed in Kachyo Wangpo the continuation of the second emanation of Karmapakshi. Thereafter, the two incarnation lines were always known as the Karmapa Shamarna. So they both hold the title Karmapa. The term Shamarpa is in reference to the red crown, which means the red crown or the red hat Lama, whereas Shanakpa means the black crowned Karmapa. So they are both considered equally as the Karmapa. Thereafter, the two incarnation lines were always known as the Karmapa Shanakpa and the Karmapa Shamarpa, literally in Tibetan, the black-crowned Karmapa and the red-crowned Karmapa. The Karmapas are the first to have institutionalized the unique form of succession through rebirth or reincarnation, known today as the Turku system. This method of succession was later adopted in other Buddhist orders of Tibet, notably with the Dalai Lamas within the Gelugpa order, which emerged much later in the 15th century. As the two main figures of the Karmakaju lineage, the Karmapas and Shamarpas have alternatively recognized each other to their respective position and have thus produced two of the most famous lines of Turkus in history. Each incarnation within the line has never failed to prove himself worthy of his illustrious predecessors, both in erudition and in spiritual attainment, as well as in accomplishments for the welfare of sentient beings. It is mainly to the deeds of the Karmapas and Shamarpas that we owe the conservation of the historical Buddha Shakyamuni's legacy in all its aspects within the Karmakaju institutions. And so that has been going on for now nearly 1,000 years. They emphasized both the instruction of the great accomplished masters, the Masidas of India, brought to Tibet by Marpa, and the Mahayana approach stressed by the great Bengali master Atisha. In particular, they maintained the ultimate legacy of the Buddha as transmitted through the very special and unique teachings known as Mahamudra. The practice of the Karmakaju lineage are therefore renowned to focus directly on the contemplative experience beyond the ritualistic or dialectical approaches more common within other orders of Buddhism. So this is not to say that the contemplative aspect is not present within other lineages. Of course, they are also very much so present in other lineages. But there is a great emphasis on that, and all the great masters have all been great contemplatives and accomplished masters within the what we know as the golden mala, or sometimes called as the golden rosary or golden string of beads of masters. The activity of the Karmapas and Shamarpas brought the Karmakaju order to great renown in the regions of Tibetan culture as well as in their neighboring countries, in particular during the 15th, 16th, and first half of the 17th century to preeminence within Tibet. So in those centuries correspond to the sort of flourishing of the Karmakaju lineage, where it held many monasteries and great importance in the history of Tibet. Because of this preeminence, some of the early Shamarpas also had to bear important responsibilities of state. The most notable example is the fourth Shamarpa Chodaishi, who was requested to fulfill the religious responsibilities of the throne of Tibet during the Pamudrupa dynasty at the turn of the 16th century. So the fourth Shamarpa Chodaishi, to comment on this point, he was a contemporary of the seventh Karmapa. They were both born quite close in age, I believe, if I remember correctly. And the fourth Shamarpa was extremely well-known and respected master throughout Tibet. Probably in his time, most of the great masters, great scholars, had all studied with him. And this was a period within the history of Tibet where the Kaju lineage, mainly through one branch known as the Pamudrupa, held temporal authority in Tibet. And the spiritual responsibilities of the Pamudrupa throne had been vacant due to the young age of the successor to the throne, and the fourth Shamarpa was asked to be the interim holder of the throne. And so in this sense, the fourth Shamarpa was sort of the Dharma king of Tibet for a time. His spiritual accomplishments in erudition, that of the fourth Shamarpa, led many of the great Buddhist scholars of his time, even from different lineages and orders, to consider him as their principal spiritual master. Later, despite the general decline of the Karmakaju institutions and forced conversion of almost all of their monasteries to the Gelug order and the aftermath of the Mongol invasion of Tibet in 1614, the fame and prestige of the Shamarpas remained undiminished. So here I'm just referencing, it's not of great spiritual importance, of course, but referencing the events in the history of Tibet. So the Karmapa and Shamarpas, as you might have now noticed, were not just within a small group important. They held really preeminence throughout all of the Himalayan regions, and particularly Tibet. They were highly respected, very renowned masters. And there was at the time, so to give you sort of a summarized sort of overview of the history of Tibet, if I remember, you have, of course, the imperial period of Tibet, and then there is a period following that which there was no sort of centralized power within Tibet, and that was actually quite true for most of the rest of the history of Tibet. But then later, within the central Tibet, there was central authority that emerged, and it first emerged under the patronage of the Mongols, and the great masters of the Sakyapa held spiritual authority and preeminence in Tibet. And this was followed by the Pamudrupas and the Shingshapas, and also the princes of Tsang, that who were all Kajupas. They held power in Tibet for a time, and during that time, of course, the Karmapas and Shamarpas were never directly, particularly the Karmapas, always refused directly to hold any kind of temporal power within Tibet. However, they held preeminence in the religious sphere in the history of Tibet. And then there was in the 1640s the invasion of central Tibet by the Mongols, and following this, then the power was offered to the Gaden Podang, the house of the Dalai Lamas, and they held then from then on not only the spiritual authority, but also they held mainly the temporal authority. They had spiritual preeminence and temporal authority in Tibet following that. And there was a period when many of the monasteries were of the Kajupas had been converted also to the Gelugpa lineage. So even though such things happened, the respect that was the respect with which the Tibetan people in general held the Karmapas and the Shamarpas never diminished. They were always respected through Tibet, and were able to continue, nevertheless, their activity. So I won't go into more detail of the history here, because there's, of course, never ending. There's a lot to be said. So the Shamarpas, namely here, I'm referencing now the 10th Shamarpa. So this is important to discuss in relation to the 14th Shamarpa. So I'll just continue to read here, and then we can go over this part again. Because of his prestige, because of the prestige, let's say, of the 10th Shamarpa, and his skills also in foreign languages, and his presence in Nepal, the 10th Shamarpa, Mepam Chudrup Gyaltso, was asked by both the Tibetans and Nepalese authorities to mediate in a dispute that they had regarding the minting rights of the Tibetan currency. So, to make the long story short, at the time, it seems that the coins of precious metal that circulated in Tibet were minted in the Kathmandu Valley by the Newar kings at the time. And they had slowly, it's the never-ending inflation problem, they had put alloy into the precious metal. And so the nominal value of the coins didn't correspond to the actual value of the coins. And Nepal had also gone through big political change in the 18th century. There was a king from a small kingdom called the Kingdom of Korka. His name was Prithvinarayan Shah, and he conquered all the neighboring kingdoms to the Kathmandu Valley, and finally he managed to conquer the kingdoms of the Kathmandu Valley, and he established what is the foundations of modern Nepal. And he wanted to maintain the privilege that the Nepalese kings of the Newar Valley of Kathmandu, the Newar kings of Kathmandu Valley had of minting the Tibetan coins. They wanted to preserve this, and they proposed that they take out of circulation all the old coins that were circulating in Tibet for their value in precious metal. But the Tibetans refused to let those coins be taken out of circulation at their real value. They wanted that they be taken out at their nominal value. So there was a dispute over that. And the 10th Shamarpa, who was traveling, because one of the previous Shamarpas also had been reborn in Nepal, had connections in Nepal, and tried to mediate. Also, the 10th Shamarpa had been the brother of the then Panchen Lama. And so he tried to mediate this for the Tibetans and Nepalese. However, the mediation wasn't successful, and the Nepalese, boldened by their general military success in founding the new and enlarged country of Nepal, actually went into Tibet and brought their army into Tibet. And the Tibetan authorities at the time, who were in close relation with China, then asked for, I believe it was the Emperor Qianlong at the time, to intervene. And he sent an army that then repelled the Nepalese and also went into the Kathmandu Valley. And then Nepalese kings paid tribute to China. And following this, so there are many points to this story, but anyway, the Shamarpa was blamed. He was used as the scapegoat by the Tibetan authorities. They claimed that he instigated the problem. And following this, then there was the whole incident had a huge financial burden on the Tibetan authorities, and they wanted to compensate themselves for the burden, and so they accused the Shamarpa. So there are, of course, different point of views on this story. So this is maybe more a point of view from the Karmakaju side, but anyway, the monastery of the Shamarpas and were confiscated and taken away, and then following this, the Tibetan authorities decided that the Shamarpas would no longer be recognized in Tibet, and so they banned the Shamarpas from holding any sort of spiritual authority in Tibet following that. So we'll go back to the text I wrote. The 10th Shamarpa's assistance was used against him by influential Tibetan aristocrats who sought to alleviate their loss in this war, falsely accusing the 10th Shamarpa of instigating the war. They confiscated all his assets, coerced his seat monastery of Yangbachen to convert to the state Gilug order, and succeeded in getting the Tibetan government to enforce a prohibition against the enthronement of any future Shamarpa. The line of Shamarpa incarnations continued nonetheless and were in secret unofficially recognized by the Karmapas. According to a prophecy by the 5th Shamarpa, Künzig Shamar, he would take rebirth several times as the Karmapa's relative. Thus, the 11th Shamarpa was Chuji Wangpo, who was the brother of the 14th Shamarpa. So there's also a mention of an emanation of the Shamarpa who was born as a physician and who helped many sentient beings throughout Tibet during this period. And then the 12th Shamarpa was Jamyang Chuji Nyima, which was one of the sons of the 15th Karmapa. And they were both great masters in their own right. The 13th incarnation, Trinlay Rinpoche, passed away as an infant in 1950. After the ban imposed by the Tibetan state on Shamarpa for political, not spiritual purposes, other Rinpoches of the Karmakaju orders fulfilled some of the main functions normally exercised by the Shamarpa, such as finding and recognizing the Karmapa. When the 14th Shamarpa was born, soon after, recognized privately by the 16th Karmapa, it remained uncertain if the ban imposed upon his predecessors could be lifted and if the incarnation would be allowed in Tibet to exercise fully his spiritual functions. So here this is sort of just to give you a bit of a background on who the Shamarpas are, their importance in the history of Tibet, and of course in the history of this very prominent and most important of Buddhist lineages, the Karmakaju lineage. And so the Shamarpas were very important. Now, coming more specifically to the 14th Shamarpa, the 14th Shamarpa was born in 1952. I was told that he was actually born on the 4th day of the 6th Tibetan month, and this traditionally is considered the day corresponding as one of the sacred days, such as today within the Tibetan Buddhist calendar. And this day commemorates the Buddha's first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, when he first expounded the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. So Shamar Rinpoche was born on that day, which is, according to my research, July 26, 1952. He was born within the Atup family, which was also the family of the late 16th Karmapa. It was a prominent family within the kingdom of Derge. So this is a kingdom that is in the eastern part of Tibet, now located in the Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture within Sichuan province. This family produced many political and religious leaders. Rinpoche's father was also the 14th Shamarpa. Rinpoche's father was also a Rinpoche, known as Terkar Chokto Rinpoche, and he passed away actually when Shamar Rinpoche was just 1 year old. And Shamar Rinpoche's mother was from the Trumotsang family, and he was her name was Punso Wangmo. And so several of late Shamar Rinpoche's uncles were respected individuals. Some of them were also important Rinpoches. The most notable of them was, of course, the 16th Karmapa. who was so the 14th Shamar Rinpoche's uncle, as well as Jigme Rinpoche's uncle, who's the brother of late Shamarpa. In 1956, together with his older brother, Jigme Rinpoche, they were sent by their mother to the Karmapa's main seat in central Tibet, so from eastern Tibet to central Tibet, to the Tsurpu monastery. For the following 3 years, they lived there with their uncle, but they were not following any kind of a formal training or anything at that time. So I believe in 1956, I think I didn't mention in here, this commemoration Rinpoche, I believe, traveled with the late 16th Karmapa. I say that because late Rinpoche told me that he had memories of traveling when he was an infant with the Karmapa to India, and he was recalling a memory of them being on a boat, on sort of a ferry on the Ganges River. And so I believe he was with the Karmapa. So there was the Karmapa as well as the Dalai Lama and many prominent Tibetan masters went to India for a big event organized by the Buddhist communities of the time to commemorate the 2,500 years since the coming of the Buddha. So I believe Shamar Rinpoche was present in India at that time. So that was 1956, I believe. So following topic, so recognition, enthronement and reinstatement of the Shamarpas. A few months after his arrival in Tsurpu, Rinpoche first revealed his identity as the Shamarpa during a major ceremony attended by people from different parts of Tibet. Rinpoche pointed out to a group of pilgrims who appeared to be nomads. He told them they were his monks. As it happened, they actually were monks from the monastery of Yangbachen, the historical seat of the Shamarpa. Astonished, they immediately asked him for his blessing. So I believe they were not like dressed as monks, they were traveling as pilgrims, and the young 14 Shamarpa identified them as being his monks. The following day, dressed in their proper monks' robes, the nomads requested an audience with the Karmapa and expressed their eagerness to have Rinpoche return to Yangbachen. The Karmapa couldn't accept because he couldn't publicly proclaim a Shamarpa incarnation because of the Tibetan government's ban that was still in place at the time. In 1957, Rinpoche joined the 16th Karmapa for an extended trip to India, Sikkim, and Nepal. So yeah, so I wrote here in the 1957, but I believe it was 56. I'm not, to be verified. And on their way back from India, so when they came back, so maybe they left in 56, came back. I don't know the exact dates here. I'm sorry about that. We'll have to do some research on this. Anyway, on his way back from, as they came back from India, they stopped on their way at the historical seat of the Shamarpas in Yangbachen. Although the monastery was administered by the Gelug order, the statues of the previous Shamarpas had not been removed from the shrines, though it is said that the red crowns that were made and placed on the images of the Shamarpas had been removed and placed on the lap of the statues, and the distinctive Gelugpa hat was put on the statues. This was kind of a little bit pointy form of like the Pandita's hat, but in yellow color. The original crowns were left on the laps of the seated images. As Rinpoche was carried around into the different chapels, he pointed out without error to the different statues of the previous Shamarpas and said each time, "Oh, this is me," and pointed out to the red crowns, "That's my hat." Also, when he saw certain objects belonging to his previous incarnations, he exclaimed, these were his. In 1958, at the invitation of the Karmapa, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, the head of Tibet, paid a formal visit to Tsurpo Monastery. So this was a rare occasion. The Karmapa took this occasion to request his honored guests to lift the sanction imposed on the incarnation line of the Shamarpas at that occasion. The Dalai Lama agreed in principle to have his government do so, but said the time was not yet appropriate to formally rescind the ban because of the ongoing turmoil in Tibet. So we are right now just before 1959 when the exile. The Karmapa took advantage of the Dalai Lama's tacit agreement and privately enthroned Shamar Rinpoche as the 14th Shamarpa during an internal ceremony at Tsurpo. He was then known as Dorji Rinpoche, not officially as the Shamarpa yet. The Chinese communist invasion of 1959 forced the 16th Karmapa, like many other Rinpoches and Lamas of Tibet, to leave into exile. The Karmapa's party traveled through Bhutan, where Rinpoche and his brother, with a few others, remained. At the invitation of the king of Sikkim, the Karmapa established his new seat at the old Karmakaju monastery of Rumtek, where Rinpoche soon after joined him. So there was already a monastery there, I believe, established during the time of the 9th Karmapa. Most of the important Karmakaju Rinpoches, as well as many important masters from other orders, such as Dilwa Khyentse Rinpoche, had grouped there around the Karmapa. Rinpoche, Shamar Rinpoche, commenced the traditional monastic curriculum, memorizing the Karmakaju liturgy and Buddhist scriptures. So I must emphasize here that the simple fact of being identified as a Turku is not, doesn't, how to say, guarantee of knowledge and so forth. Although the Shamarpas and Karmapas, as well as many other teachers, are highly realized, accomplished, they still do show the example of how it is that we should study, how it is that we should practice. And in that sense, they will study and learn very much like ourselves, although they may be more gifted due to their, how to say, intimate familiarity with the Buddhist teaching, and particularly their actualization of the wisdom. They nevertheless will and have to show the example and study. And the study is very rigorous. The traditional curriculum of what the Karmakaju masters and teachers follow is extremely rigorous and vast. First, for example, traditionally in the Karmakaju monasteries, and particularly at the seat of the Karmapa, any ceremony or liturgy that was undertaken by the monks, no text was allowed in the shrine. All the practitioners had to recite all the long liturgical scriptures entirely by heart. So a main part of the beginning part of the learning encompasses learning by heart a very vast corpus of texts. That is all the sadhanas and rituals, prayers that are done regularly. And this amounts to several hundreds of pages of liturgical text that all the monks learn. And traditionally, the monks who become monk in the Tsurpa monastery, when they first start studying, and they must accomplish chores in the monastery as a young monk. So they learn how to read and write, and then they learn how to memorize the texts. And until they know all the liturgy by heart, they must accomplish the chores of cleaning and serving tea and so forth. And then once they have passed all the memorization examens, then they officiate the ritual at one important ceremony. Then they after that they don't have to accomplish those types of chores. Of course, they have other responsibilities, but the first chores they don't have to accomplish anymore, and then they can fully enter the body of monastics. So these are sort of one aspect of it. Another aspect, of course, is this is mainly the monastic, the Vajrayana monastic context. This is called the Digda in general in Tibetan. So where they mainly focus on the rituals and on the practice. And parallelly to this, of course, they may receive instructions of the teachers and accomplish the 3-year retreat. Originally, in older times within the Kagyu lineage, there was a more extensive curriculum focusing on, of course, all of the Buddhist philosophical texts. But following the Mongol invasion and decline of the Kagyu monasteries in Tibet, those traditions had continued, but at a much smaller scale. And this was one of the wishes of the late Karmapa, and also what Shamarpa had put a lot of energy in maintaining and reinstating, as all the also scholarly tradition of the study of the Buddhist philosophical texts. And so here also traditionally the root text, so this follows ancient practice of India. So in ancient times, of course, we didn't have the facilities that we have today in printing, and also of course not electronic facilities that we have today, but most texts were manuscripts. Manuscripts were rare, and so masters would write a condensed version in a metered or versified form that was easily memorizable. So for memotechnical purposes, you could say, in a versified form, the roots of the texts of the philosophical treatises. And so students would learn these root texts by heart, and then they would study the explanations from the masters, and also by reading commentaries on those root texts. So this was a classical method of learning in India, which was very faithfully preserved in Tibet. Late Shamar Rinpoche proved to be particularly gifted in learning thanks to his exceptional... Yeah? Ah, okay. Faut ralentir. Okay. All right. So, yes, Rinpoche, so I'm told to go slow. So Rinpoche proved to be particularly gifted in learning thanks to his great intelligence and capacity of mastering subtle and complex notion, innovative mind, and uncommon photographic memory. He had an extraordinary memory. Now, I was told of a story when Rinpoche was very young, I believe when he was in Bhutan. He was reading, I think, the Manjushri Namasamgiti, and while reading that text, often young pupils, they will just memorize the words because there's sort of a discrepancy between the oral language and the classical written Tibetan. Classical written Tibetan doesn't really correspond perfectly to the oral language. So sometimes young students just learn these words by heart, not necessarily understanding fully what they're learning by heart. Whereas Shamar Rinpoche, when he was reading the text, he was understanding the words and asking questions about some of the meanings, and that had greatly impressed, of course, those around him. Although he was just a very young infant, he showed such understanding and intelligence. So coming back to my text, in 1960, the 16 Karmapa bestowed the Kajung Hanzu and the Damganzu empowerment. So the Kajung Hanzu and the Damganzu, these are two very extensive collections of scriptures that were brought together by the great Jamgon Kongtrul Lodru Taye. Kajung Hanzu is a collection of all the teachings that were brought from India to Tibet by the great master Marpa, the translator. And so these are all the tantras, and very important for not only the Karma Kagyu lineage, but for all the other Kagyu traditions. So this is within the Sarma lineages, mainly the Kagyu transmission. And Jamgon Kongtrul had received, of course, and brought together all these transmissions and transmitted them in a set. And these, the late Karmapa transmitted them in Rumtek Monastery, as well as the Damganzu. So this is the treasury of the esoteric instructions, key instructions. So this is not just limited to the Kagyu lineages. Here we have the transmissions of what is known as the transmissions of the 8 great chariots, so 8 great lineages of practice of India brought to Tibet. So you have, of course, the very profound, vast teachings of the Nyingma tradition, but also of the Sarma traditions, such as the Sakyapas, the teachings of the Sakyapas, of the Kadampas, of the Kajupas, the different branches of the Kajupa, the Shangpa, also of what is known as the Shiji, that comes from Patamba Sangji, of Ju from Machi Labji Dharma, and then you have also the cycle of teachings related to the Jorduk, or the Kala Chakra Tantra, and then also a transmission known as the Dorji Sumchi Ninju, and so forth. So there are many transmissions here. All these were imparted on Shamar Rinpoche, as well as the important Rinpoches who had gathered around the 16th Karmapa. And so these transmissions and Kri instructions gather respectively the heart and source of the spiritual legacy of the Kagyu orders and the 8 great practice lineages of Buddhism that were brought from India to Tibet. In 1964, Rinpoche was officially enthroned as the Shamarpa. So here the Shamar Rinpoche, age 12, I believe he was at that time, went to Dharamsala, the seat of the Dalai Lama in exile, and received the Dalai Lama's blessing, and officially the Tibetan government reinstated the position of the Shamarpas at that occasion. And then following this, the 16th Karmapa elevated the Shamarpa publicly to the highest position after himself within the Kagyu order, and appointed him as his main heir and the next spiritual lineage holder. This is made clear in the long life prayer and that the 16th Karmapa wrote at this occasion. He writes there, The most exalted, the Lord of the lands of snow, is Avalokiteshvara. The coalescence of his essence is the glorious Karmapa. Inseparable from his three mysteries, that means body, speech, and mind, in the manner of the three lords, that is like, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Vajrapani, who are different aspects of the same essence of enlightenment. In his manifestation, the great emanation, the majestic sun, whom I invest now, sovereign of the practice lineages order, by the power of scattering auspicious flowers of excellent virtue, combined with the true words of the Rishi's truthfulness, may he successfully and everlastingly be the sovereign of the lineage. Of course, now that the Karmapa, as well as most Tibetans at the time, were all in exile, the political authority of the Dalai Lama and so forth didn't really exist concretely. Nevertheless, through respect for the Tibetan for the Tibetan people and the Tibetan authorities, and in the hope of the perpetuation and the continuation of the legacy of Tibet and its people, the Karmapa sought to gain the approval of the Dalai Lama and his exiled government, and in this sense secured the reinstatement of the Shamarpas. The Dalai Lama personally performed for the 14th Shamarpa the traditional hair-cutting ceremony at his seat in Dharamsala in India. So for the following point is to look at the Shamarpa's basically education, his studies. So this I entitled Receiving and Upholding the Karmapa's Legacy. So in the following years at Rumtek, Shamar Rinpoche dedicated himself fully to the study of Buddhist classics. So these are, of course, the Abhidharma, that mainly focuses on knowledge, on wisdom, on Vinaya. Vinaya is the scriptures that mainly speak about ethical conduct, and in particular about how monks should live together and how the rules that they should follow. And also Brahmana. Brahmana is a topic related to what we may translate roughly as Buddhist epistemology, basically understanding how we perceive, how we know, how we can come to unmistaken understanding. So this includes topics such as logic and inference and perception, and all these topics are discussed here. The main author, the main master who wrote extensively in authority on this subject is the great Indian master Dharmakirti, and as well as Madhyamaka. Madhyamaka, of course, the main figure here, author, is Nagarjuna, the middle way. But also studying this, one also studies the other Buddhist schools, and Prajnaparamita. So the topic of Prajnaparamita, or the esoteric, or not the explicit teaching, but the implicit teaching in the perfection of wisdom scriptures that present the different, the 5 paths, the 10 bhumis, the different stages of realization. So these are all very important topics. And also putting into practice the essence of the numerous transmissions he had received from the Karmapa and other masters. Rinpoche showed, late Shamar Rinpoche showed his prodigious nature in many ways, to the great amazement of his teachers and fellow students, Rinpoche would bring up questions no one had thought of and come up with original solutions to complex problematics. Once Rinpoche found unconvincing the explanation he had so far heard on how rebirth was possible. So, so knowing it was an important point of the teachings that needed an irrefutable explanation, Rinpoche thought about it carefully. As he was having difficulties, one morning, the great Buddhist master Vasubandhu appeared to him in a vision and gave him in verse a simple yet very pertinent solution. So sometimes when he would, as in this example, Rinpoche himself told me the story, he had the difficulty understanding a point. But this bodhisattvas must have appeared to him. But anyway, he shared with me this one instance of the great master Vasubandhu himself appearing to him and teaching him a few verses that give solution to his understanding. So later in the text, I transcribed it, what Rinpoche told me. So anyway, during this period, Rinpoche received transmissions such as the Gyalwa Karmapa. So this is another collection. So among the 5 treasuries of Nyambong Kongtrul Lodro Taye, you have the 2 we mentioned, the Kajung Hanzu and the Damnganzu. There's also a treasury that doesn't contain any empowerments, but is kind of an encyclopedia of Buddhist knowledge called the Shejak Kunchaptsu. And there's another collection of Nyambong Kongtrul's own writings and his also sadhanas he wrote on other texts that are more clear and more easy to use. And there's a whole collection of his own works called the Gyalwa Karmapa. He received those. So the collected teachings of Nyambong Kongtrul the Great and the collection of sadhanas are assembled. And then he also received parallelly that a collection of the empowerments to or the authorization empowerments of the sadhanas assembled by the 9th Karmapa, known as the Chikshi Kundur. So this is a collection of mainly Njianang, so authorization of practice of sadhanas. So you have a number of practice such as the practice of Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Tara, and so forth. They're all contained in here, what we also use quite commonly in our everyday practice. Most importantly, the Karmapa imparted to the Shamarpa the instructions of Mahamudra. So here are mainly the 9th Karmapa's 3 cycles of Mahamudra. Also there's a collection of Indian sources of Mahamudra called the Chakchen Jajung. This collection was compiled by the 7th Karmapa, but also Rinpoche received the complete collection of teachings of Gampopa. Being destined to be his sole successor, the Karmapa bestowed upon Shamar Rinpoche in 1976, I believe it was, the Kajung Hanzu for a second time in much greater detail. And in 1980, the year before his passing, the Karmapa gave to the Shamarpa alone the lineage's very special and unique transmission of ultimate realization that had been passed without interruption through lineage holder to lineage holder from the Buddha Vajradhara in Tilopa up to the 16th Karmapa himself. Besides the Karmapa, Shamar Rinpoche also, so after these receiving these transmissions from the Karmapa before he passed away, Karmapa had instructed him to, if he had points or detail, clarification, that those could be bestowed to him by the late Pao Rinpoche. And so I believe it's 1985, Shamar Rinpoche came here to the Dordogne where at that time the late Paul Rinpoche was residing, and received from him a certain number of Mahamudra instructions and certain instructions that are only transmitted orally, that don't have any written text, corresponding written text. Besides the Karmapa, Shamar Rinpoche also received many important and rare transmissions from several other accomplished masters. For example, he received from Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche the Nyingtik cycle of teachings of Longchenpa, from Kalu Rinpoche, from the late Kalu Rinpoche, the 6 dharmas of Naropa, and the complete transmission of the Shangpa lineage's teachings. And from Urjin Trungpa Rinpoche, he received the Rinchen Terenzu, which is another of the 5 treasures of Jamgon Kongtru, which is the complete collection of all the dharmas. Those are the treasures of teachings that were teachings from Padmasambhava and his great disciples that were buried either physically in some places for later generations, or mentally in the mind stream of great Tertans, and that had been later revealed. And in all these teachings, Jamgon Kongtru gathered them in a whole collection. And so Rinpoche received these from Ujin Trungpa Rinpoche, and also the cycle of Chonling Tersar teachings. Most especially in 1985, following the Karmapa's advice, Shamar Rinpoche obtained from Nenang Pao Rinpoche, the last main living disciple of this 15th Karmapa, hidden key Mahamudra instructions never committed to writing. So that was what I was mentioning earlier. Later, Rinpoche also received from Lama Gyindin Rinpoche a unique oral transmission that the Karmapa had given to him alone, with instruction to later transmit it to the Shamarpa, and if possible, the next Karmapa. This transmission related to the practice of transforming and mastering the process of life and death, which empowers the practitioner with the ability to communicate directly with the Buddhas in their respective realms. No other practitioner or teacher of Rinpoche's generation has been able to receive, let alone master, these particular transmissions. So, of course, important to mention here the unique sort of transmissions that Gampopa had received from Milarepa, that he passed along, on to the first Karmapa, Tusum Chempa, which are the Chirim Linchik Chempa and Dzongrim Lungsim Yerme, the unique transmissions of the generation phase and the completion phases, known as the completion phase, known as the inseparability of mind and wind. So there are some specific instructions that the Shamarpa, of course, also received. These are that are unique to the Karmakaju lineage. In this way, Rinpoche was, in addition to being a great Buddhist scholar and holder of the triple ordination, Pratik Moksha, Bodhisattva, and Vidyavadara vows. So this, so the Vajrayana tradition is not like tradition that excludes the Shravaka path and the Mahayana path. It is each practice supersedes and goes further. And so the ordinations of the Shravaka or the and the Bodhisattva must be maintained. It's on that basis that the Vajrayana practice that furthers the knowledge of those teachings. As none of these transmissions are in any way kind of in opposition to one another. They're just going more in depth and in greater profoundness one from the other. So so there's this notion of the triple ordination, receiving the ordination of the Pratik Moksha, of the Bodhisattva, and also the Samayas of the Vajradhara, of the Vidyadhara. And so in this way, we may see of Sumden Dorjin Zinpa, or the holder of the Vajra endowed with the triple vows. So Rinpoche had in this way mastered all of these teachings and upheld them all completely. He had an unparalleled knowledge of the Buddha's teachings, and through its practice he gained not only experience but the actual realization of awakening, as the extraordinary example of his actions confirm. So for us, it is difficult to see the mind of an individual. We cannot say if he is enlightened or not, but we can infer from the activity and presence of a teacher his realization. And so his example of who he was, what he accomplished, exemplify or manifest actually his realization. The exact extent of his realization is impossible for any of us to say it is this or that. However, as being his disciple, and for our own sake, it is important that we are able to first discern what an authentic teacher is. And once we have discerned that authentic teacher, that we are able to offer towards that teacher confidence, such as we would offer the Buddha in person. And so in this sense, we can, truly benefit from the transmissions, the teachings, and his example, and ourselves manifest within our mind stream the realization of the teacher. This was, in my understanding, Rinpoche's greatest quality. He did not just hold a historical title or position. He actually embodied, through his spiritual realization, its true meaning and its function. He was in this way truly equal to his predecessors, the Shamarpa, Amastita, and the unsurpassable lineage holder, and thus he was able to guide, without misleading or error, the disciple towards their well-being and awakening. So, in many ways, through just to share sort of my own observation, I had the privilege, to meet the Shamarpa when I was an infant child, and I must have been sort of 8 or 9 when he first sort of gave me some instructions. I remember clearly the first sort of teaching he gave me was about the Pure Land of Buddha Amitabha, how to take rebirth there, and how important it was to cultivate the causes to take rebirth in the Pure Land of Buddha Amitabha. Of course, as an 8-year-old, you'd never think of death, and so it strongly left a strong imprint on me. I clearly remember the teaching and the kindness with which he bestowed that teaching. And then later, when I was 11, I had the chance of receiving from him the He Vajra cycle of empowerments, and received then many more throughout the years teachings from the Shamarpa. And having been with many Buddhist masters of different lineages, of also older generations, and some also contemporary to the Shamarpa himself, there is in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition a sort of a formalism. A lot of formality can be there, and some teachers, although young, take themselves very seriously in their position and title and so forth. But what I remarked about the 14th Shamarpa is he never took any of that seriously. He was actually somebody very simple, very down to earth. He had no pride of thinking I am better or more important. He liked things simple, not complicated. Often he would travel, he had just like a simple bag. Winter or summer, he wore a pair of sandals, and he didn't like the fuss that much of the ceremonial, hieratic aspect sometimes that sort of the traditional format may give. Is not attached to those things at all. And true sign of bodhisattva is the absence of pride. There's bodhicitta cannot be present where there is pride. If the bodhicitta is truly there, there's no pride. And in that sense, he manifested that. Also, he had free of all attachment to all kind of ordinary concepts and beliefs and things, and that gave him at the same time extremely open mind and very accessible to everything that is pertinent in our modern world in today's time. So those are some of the qualities. And of course, he in terms of his the formal knowledge and the realization, there's nothing that seemed to be obscure to him. He had a clear vision overall, whatever question we would put to him. And more particularly, his kindness was without measure. He truly didn't teach because he was trying to, build something for himself or whatever. He's just trying to help, benefit, help the students come to understand, come to gain wisdom. And he would try to impart that in many different ways. I'm sure probably many of you present here have met him, and we might each have our different experience with him. And whatever it is, I think if we look back, we can see that corresponding to who we are, maybe how he was with us, somehow brought us insight and blessing in one way or another. And I've met many people who can attest to that, and some, although they had not had the chance of also meeting him in person, just through learning about him, hearing that he is the Shamarpa, and just because there is traditionally immense reverence, because in the Karmapa in general and in the Shamarpa, probably in Tibet, the Karmapa is held as one of the most holy individuals, highly revered throughout Tibet. So there's naturally a great respect. I've heard of people who, for example, were in prison and who are being faced with a danger and difficulty, and they one-pointedly pray to the Shamarpa, and although suddenly they found themselves like in a halo of light, protected, although they were being beaten and tortured, they felt nothing. Such blessings did occur on just an ordinary level. Many occasions, I myself, whenever there was a kind of a challenge or difficulty in my life, the phone would ring and Rinpoche was there. He would give me counsel. Other times, when I needed to talk to him, Rinpoche was traveling always here and there. Once I needed to talk to him urgently, and I called the number I had of him, and he was far away in Bhutan, in an area where there was no phone connection, and he picked up the phone, and he was saying, he said, it's weird, there's no connection, but it's working. And so in this sense, it's not just kind of anyone. He may appear like a human being, but that's just his manifestation. Behind that is, the presence of the enlightened activity and benevolence, kindness of the great bodhisattvas and the Buddhas. So maybe it's getting late, so I will maybe just conclude here by looking, maybe not go through everything that I had wrote in the past, but just go through some of Rinpoche's activities to conclude here. And so one of the, I'm going to just summarize here, one of the main activities, of course, of the Shamarpa was to ensure the maintenance of the institutions, and so that many people could come and study the Dharma. Shamar Rinpoche then accomplished his function as this lineage holder, and he taught in many of the Kagyu centers and monasteries. He restored, for example, the Karmaraja Mahavira temple, Mahavihara temple in Swayambhu in the late 70s, already when he was young. Then after the Karmapa's passing, he assumed more fully his responsibility. He looked after and foresaw for the welfare of the Karmapa's seat in India. And he traveled to the many centers throughout Southeast Asia and the West, and also within India, Buddhist centers and monasteries, India and Nepal. Fulfilling the Karmapa's wishes, the Shamar Rinpoche oversaw the publishing of a new edition of the Buddhist canon, particularly the Ganjur, the 240 volumes of the exegetical Buddhist Indian scriptures translated into Tibetan. And he also worked on publishing the collection of the Indian Mahamudra scriptures, and offered many copies of these, and made them more accessible. Also, he rebuilt the monastery of Yangpachen in Tibet, which was destroyed after the communist takeover of Tibet and the Cultural Revolution. Due to the aftermaths of the Cultural Revolution, the monastery had been destroyed. He supported in its rebuilding and established so there's now a 3-year retreat, a monastery, a fully functioning also a Buddhist institute for higher studies. And then, of course, Rinpoche made great effort in finding the 17th Karmapa, enthroning the 17th Karmapa, and imparting to the 17th Karmapa all the transmissions that he had received. Rinpoche also built in Nepal the Sharminup Institute, the retreat center for the preservation of the Vinaya and the Mahamudra teachings, the Naranjana Center, also located next to Sharminup, also retreat complex in Parping and Maratika in Nepal, in the Darjeeling and Sikkim area, establishing schools also for primary schools where also Buddhist teaching is given, and Institute for Higher Buddhist Studies, the Sri Divaka Institute. Rinpoche also put a lot of effort in the West here, in France, for example, helping with here Taboka Juling and Kundruling and the retreat centers, giving empowerments, instructions there. Here also in the United States and in Southeast Asia, also in Europe, established a group of Buddhist centers known as the Bodhipath Buddhist centers to be non-sectarian, focusing mainly on the Lojong practices and the Mayan practices, so making the Buddhist teachings more accessible to modern lay practitioners. Rinpoche also made effort in trying to bridge sort of Buddhism with the modern world and modern concerns. I had the honor and privilege to accompany Rinpoche in several meetings with scientists to discuss the nature of mind. We'd entitled those meetings "The Sciences of Mind," held in Stanford University in California. And Rinpoche also was interested in many social projects, helping the poor and needy, helping particularly animals. He started the Infinite Compassion, trying to look after the welfare of animals. So there are very numerous projects Rinpoche undertook, and so difficult for me to name them all here. So this is a brief sort of overview of Shamar Rinpoche's life, and his legacy lies now with the Karmapa and with us all as his disciple and disciple of his disciples. And so it is important that to honor him, that we really uphold the instructions of the Buddha, that we deepen our understanding of the teachings of the Buddha, and to the best of our ability put it into practice in our everyday life. By doing so, we will not only honor our teacher's memory, we will be able to benefit others, and principally really benefit ourselves, ensure that we do not create more suffering and difficulty for ourselves. So yes, maybe we can just conclude here by the importance of a teacher, importance of confidence. So in Buddhism we emphasize also the notion of faith. Faith here in Buddhism is not seen as some kind of blind faith, where we must just blindly believe. Faith is rooted in insight. So although we do not have a full insight into the depths and subtleties of the Buddha's teaching, we may have a glimpse of it. So whatever it is that brought you here to listen to me today is because at some moment in your life you have come to encounter or come into contact with the Buddha Dharma, and some confidence grew in you, whether it is because you observed the excellence of the teachers, their kindness, their benevolence, or you have had some insight into the truthfulness, pertinence of the teachings of the Buddha, or you have come to experience, taste for yourself the benefits of practicing the Dharma. You have through that gained confidence. That is what is called faith, or that confidence that grows from the insight that we have had. And it's because of that that you are here. And it's important that before we are fully realized and that our wisdom is completed, that we never lose hold of that confidence, that we keep relying on that. We don't forget what has brought us to the Dharma, what has brought us too want to learn more about the Dharma. And then this confidence is something that will grow further and further, will become kind of irrevertible faith. Nothing in the whole world can turn you away from it, because there is a clear discernment that accompanies it. And so this is what we can rely on. It is a source of many benefits, and so offering in this way our trust and confidence to the teacher who sort of introduced us to wisdom, and is very important. Through this confidence and through then pursuing the development of wisdom, then eventually we will come to uphold the ultimate teacher. The ultimate teacher is a realization itself. But the external teacher, the teacher who is the holder of the lineage, who transmits this, is extremely important. Without it, then we will have no access to the ultimate teacher, realization and or wisdom. So that is the true teacher. So in this sense, recalling the life of our teachers, thinking about their deeds, thinking about their example, is something that will nourish our faith, our confidence in the Dharma, and will help us develop wisdom. And more particularly, these teachers are the example. They show us the example. How is it that we must study? How is it that we must practice? Some of us have, done some 3-year retreat practices. Some of us have studied. Some of us have partially done certain things. And looking at the example of life of such a teacher who has done all of these in the most complete way, then we see how we must follow their example, how we can emulate their diligence in study, their diligence and benevolence and kindness and dedication to other sentient beings. And so in this sense, I invite you all to further your understanding of the example of such a great teacher that was the Shamarpa, and particularly our late Künzig Shamarpa the 14th. So thank you all for your attention, and I think we can conclude here for today. It's getting late. I hope it wasn't too fast at the end for the translators. And anyway, thank you for the translators for your focus and diligence. And now please join me in the dedication of merit. So whatever merit there may be, and here recalling the memory of our late teacher, may this merit enable all beings to achieve his complete and perfect realization. Sonam di thamchi zibani toni ni pe ranam pamchi ni chega na je balap truba sibe tsulen ro wa sho.